you just care so much more about everything when you have kids. As an individual, we might maybe can think 20 years in the future, 30 years in the future. That might be how much time I've got left, 40, whatever. But when you have kids, all of a sudden it's this much longer timeline you're thinking about, and you care. It's weird to say, and I think it's hard for people to understand until they have kids, but you just care so much more about everything when you have kids. It's one thing for me to lose these opportunities. That would really suck. I would hate that. To imagine my children not having these opportunities is devastating.
I was like, well, if I throw a mic on, then I can help others the way that these people have all helped me.
Born in the heart of the Pennsylvania deer camp, with the help of experts, friends, and local legends, we bring you valuable knowledge and powerful stories for your hunting adventures. Welcome to the East Meets West Hunt Podcast with your host, Beau Martonic.
All right, Mark Kenyon, welcome back to the podcast, man. It's been a little while.
Hey, Beau, thanks. I appreciate the invite, and looking forward to catching up.
Yeah, I know. I haven't. Well, you and I text back and forth here and there, but we hadn't run into each other in quite a while now. I guess it was been since we were in North Dakota. Was that the last time that I got to see you in person? Happened to walk into a bar restaurant and run into you there. But
yeah, that was great. It was fun to get to chat that night. What was that? Was that last summer or the summer before that?
I thought it was last summer, but it was 2 summers ago at this point.
Jeez, time flies.
Yeah, it definitely does. But yeah, it's been good. It's good to catch up with you and get to have you back on the podcast. We were just talking beforehand about, you're in Michigan and I'm in Pennsylvania, and we've had a true winter so far that we remember when, both of us were kids pretty much.
Yeah. It's nice to have snow again, at least in my part of Michigan, in the southern part. For the last 15, almost 20 years that I've been down here, we hardly have consistent snow cover. But now, finally, we've got it back, and it's really nice. If it's going to be cold and dreary, as it often is in the Midwest, you might as well have some pretty white snow out there. It's fun for the kids to play in. It's pretty for a trail run or a hike on the weekends and stuff. So I'm all about it. It's been a good winter for that reason. Yeah,
I agree. I agree with that. It's I feel like the deer are probably a little bit shocked. Well, I mean, last year we had a little bit of a ramp up. Last year was a little bit of a tougher winter than the previous 5 years, but this winter definitely seems to trump that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. The deer are likely feeling it. That's for certain. I'm seeing it in my little neck of the woods, like in our yard, which this doesn't happen too often. We have deer in our yard right now consistently eating on like the ornamental evergreen trees, eating honey locust pods. There's 3 little bucks that have been in our garden where we've got 2 old apple trees, and they've been up there in daylight, scrounging for any last little spare apple on the ground. So yeah, they are feeling it. It will likely be good for shed season. I've always found that these really hard winters with a lot of snow seems to congregate deer in the winter, and those just always seem to be the better shed seasons when these deer are packed into more concentrated zones that I think are more predictable. And just when they're in those tighter areas, it just seems like it's easier to find. So that's a selfish silver lining, I guess.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree on that. The one thing that I thought was wild, and by the time this one comes out, this podcast will be mid-February, so we're getting towards the end. I didn't want to talk about it publicly at the time, but in my area, most of the deer that I had on camera and saw had shed in December this year. So it was pretty crazy just from in the areas that didn't have good food. We had some drought conditions that were leading, I think the stress, I'm not a biologist by any means, but the stress, we had some really cold snaps in December there. And it seemed like after that, it was pretty wild. But I went out to pull some trail cameras before Christmas, and I ended up finding 7 sheds in the big woods, like that doesn't typically happen. And I wasn't even, I started looking after, I started finding a few in the area, but they were all congregated in one spot. And that wasn't really even my goal. It was just, go out and get some cameras and bring them back in, get them cleaned up and everything. And, it was pretty wild but it, with that being said, with how bad it's been and everything, I don't want to go out and harass the deer and put any more any other stress on them. So I've stayed out of the woods through January, other than, going out for hikes and on trails and kind of, general feeding areas, but try not to put any additional pressure on them.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I've always thought the same thing, like trying to be wait, as late as you can. And then B, if you're going to go in there, try to do like a one-time shot in any given area, right? So you're not putting stress on these critters day after day after day, every single weekend in the same zone, right? Maybe pick, all right, this is the one day I'm going to hit this 10 acres or whatever it is, or 50 acres or 100 acres, and then hit it. And then one day you're there, it bumps them, but then you're out of there, and hopefully that's it. So finding any way to limit that stress a little bit, I think is a pretty reasonable thing to ask of people. And it's a good thing to do.
Yeah, I think the one helpful thing in like my area with it needing a lot of unmaintained roads to get to some of these places, that it closes out people, going in and trying to, put, unneeded stress on the deer. So yeah, I think that helps a little bit there, but that's a very good point. Kind of similar to scouting strategies a lot of times of, hey, if you're going to be intrusive, try to do it all in one day versus, just tiptoeing in every time.
Yeah. Same exact idea.
But anyways, so Mark, you've been on the podcast before. Your podcast Wired to Hunt is well known, done a lot of stuff through MeatEater. And I wanted to congratulate you first on a couple of accomplishments that I saw, at least on the outside, now being the director of conservation for MeatEater. So congratulations. That is an awesome accomplishment there. And then also, joining the board for BHA, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. So that's awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Beau. I appreciate it. It's exciting for me. It's continuing to give me an opportunity to work on the things that I'm really passionate about. So yeah, excited for those chances. Excited to hopefully use some of my experience and the stuff that I've worked on over the years to make sure we've got quality places to hunt and fish, and plenty of wildlife and fish to chase after, and good stuff for us all to enjoy. So that's really the kind of stuff that wakes me up in the morning and gets me excited. So I'm really lucky to get to have that be a big part of my job now too. So very thankful for that.
Yeah. And so was it always that way for you, or was it through time that you've really, honed in on, from the conservation, the access side of things, and, writing That Wild Country, which I have it on my bookshelf over there? Like, was that always something when you were younger and got into hunting, was something that was at the forefront of your mind, or is that something over the last 10 years that has shifted?
Yeah, it's been an evolution. As a kid, I just loved it. I just loved the outdoors, all of it. So I had this deep passion for hunting and fishing and anything outside. And my family was never particularly like advocacy focused or anything like that. I wasn't hearing from anyone like, hey, you got to fight for this stuff. Hey, you got to speak up about this stuff. But the one thing that was consistent for my grandpa and my dad was just respect for wildlife. It was really, really important to respect these animals. If you're going to hunt them, you need to do it ethically, carefully, cleanly. That was hammered into me. So I think that was foundational to my relationship when it came to being a hunter and angler. But then, I started Wired to Hunt back in 2008, and, was just finding more and more ways to dive deeper into this thing I loved. And somewhere along the way, probably, somewhere between like 2010, 11, 12, somewhere in that window, I just started reading things that opened my eyes a little bit more to the how and why of us having all of this. I knew we had these incredible public lands and all these wildlife that I enjoyed so much, but I never understood how we got them. I never understood how that came to be. But in that window, 2009, 10, 11, somewhere around there, I just started digging into that more. I read a pretty famous book called A Sand County Almanac by Aldo Leopold, started learning about the history of our public lands and all that. And I think that's when I started realizing, like, oh, wow, this isn't here by accident. If I want to be able to keep doing these things, if I want, to have thriving populations of deer or elk or pronghorn or whatever, if I want these incredible places like I've been able to experience, like the Tetons or the wild public lands around Montana or Idaho or northern Michigan, like if I want that stuff to still be around, it's actually going to require me to still to do something about it. It's not guaranteed in the future. So from that time on, I've slowly learned more and more. And then with that, just became more and more interested in, like, how do I be a part of that continuing? And so, yes, around like 2015 or 16 was when not the first, but the latest real big push until this past summer to transfer or sell public lands happened. And so as I started learning about what that all meant back in 15 and 16, that's when I decided to tackle that first book. And then at that point, like, decided to really dedicate myself to, like, hey, this is going to become like where my career heads. That's the direction I want to go. Finding ways that I can really make a difference. So for the last 10 years, since then, I've been working on that hard, really, with everything I do, whether it be with like my core stuff with MeatEater and Wired to Hunt, or side projects like that book. And I just have now wrapped up a second book, which will be published in about 1 year. And a bunch of other things like that. So yeah, it's been an evolution, and it's all very tightly tied to my love of hunting and fishing and, teaching folks about that stuff. And now this is just kind of like the natural next step coming from that.
Yeah. And I would imagine too, being a father now is to being able to pass that down, and them to be able to have those same opportunities that you've been able to have growing up and being able to go to these places. I think it's something that a lot of, it's not that I think, I know that a lot of people, including myself for the longest time, took it for granted. I had just so much public land available where I grew up that it was just like, I thought that's just what it was. Like,
yeah,
all right, you could just go hunt really anywhere and have this available. And as I've been able to see it throughout, whether through starting the podcast in 2018 and times before that and traveling other places, I was like, man, this is I need to pay a little bit more attention to this than I have in the past. And similarly, like growing up, I wouldn't say that my family was very strong in like advocating for, particularly these issues or public land, but like was very instilled that into me as a kid, is like, you do things the way that it's supposed to be done. You do these things ethically. There's no shortcuts, like that sort of deal. So I think that's helped with molding it. But, admittedly, I still feel like I'm always behind on knowing what's going on or being able to understand it. There's just so many things that are coming at us as sportsmen and women, from all different places, from access to just hunting rights per se, particular pursuits, like all those things that I feel like, man, you need to be a full-time job just to keep updated on all these things.
Yeah. Well, that's my full-time job now. So you're right.
See, look, I said that to help, make sure you have that job in the future.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that, Beau. But you're right. I mean, there is a fire hose of stuff these days. And it is hard to make sense of it. And to your point, I think a lot of us, probably most of us, did take it for granted for most of our lives. But I do think that's changing. I think more and more folks are realizing now. I think you and I being examples of that, but I'm sure there's many other people too who are, becoming aware of the fact that all of this is a privilege. All of this has been passed down to us by our predecessors. And with that comes like the need to grab the baton and carry it forward. And so now, I think each of us in our own way can try to figure out what that means for us as individuals. And it's not going to be the same for everyone. It doesn't have to be. But I think there's an opportunity for each of us to find what that thing is for us.
Yeah. I can definitely agree with that. Do you feel like there was one, one trip or one place or some place you were at where it really just like hit home for you? Like you were sitting there and you're like, you know what? Like this was it. I know you had mentioned about the culmination of reading and understanding things and it becoming real in 2015, 16, but was there like one place where it was like, man, I need to do everything I can to make sure I can always come back to this place?
There's probably dozens of examples of moments when I felt like that. So many. But one does stand out right out the gate, which would have been on my first trip to Alaska. And it was particularly meaningful. And I wrote about this in that book you mentioned. So you're going to know this story. But I visited Alaska for the first time. And it was right around the same time when it was leading up to my first son being born. So I knew I was going to be a dad. And now I'm in Alaska for the first time. And we were dropped 120 miles from the nearest road on the top of this mountain. And we're right in the midst of a unbelievable caribou migration. There's not another person, town, building, car, anything for, like I said, more than 100 miles. And I just remember sitting there. You know, oftentimes we were with a group of people, but there were also times when we could just kind of go off and hang out by ourselves. And I remember on the last day, it was one of those time periods where we'd packed up camp. We were all ready to go. We were just waiting for our planes to arrive to pick us up. And everyone just kind of went off in different directions, took naps, just waiting around. And I went off by myself on one side of the ridge, and I laid down on my back, kind of propped up my head, and I could just see over this endless array of ridges and hills, and you could see all the way to the Yukon River. And I just remember sitting there and thinking to myself, this is unbelievable that this is mine. Like as an American, this is mine and this is ours. This is all of ours. And then thinking that my son someday, this will be his too. And what an unbelievable gift. What a crazy lucky thing it is to be an American and to live in this place and to have these wild things and these wild opportunities. And that whole, like you said it, you know, being a father. And at that point I was thinking about soon becoming a father. That just makes everything so much more real, so much more visceral. It expands your timeline, right? As an individual, you know, we might maybe can think 20 years in the future, 30 years in the future. That might be how much time I've got left, 40, whatever. But when you have kids, all of a sudden it's this much longer timeline you're thinking about, and you care. It's weird to say, and I think it's hard for people to understand until they have kids, but you just care so much more about everything when you have kids. Like it's one thing for me to lose these opportunities. That would really suck. I would hate that. But to imagine my children not having these opportunities is devastating, like heartbreaking. And so that was really profound for me because that was one of the first times when I started to feel that parenting thing, for lack of a better term. And then ever since then, you know, I just continue to have new versions of that. My boys are 6 and 8 years old now, which is insane. And
man, that is wild. Yeah. I just remember, you know, listening to you talking about it, you know, getting prepared to be a dad and as baby. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's gone so fast. And it's been the coolest thing in the world, getting to share these places and these experiences and hunting and fishing with my kids and watching them fall in love with it themselves. So yeah, it's just given me this insane fire now to keep doing it and work harder than ever for it, because you can see how good it is for these kids, for everyone to be outside, to be able to hunt or fish or backpack or camp or climb or whatever. You can see it's real, it's visceral, it's positive. It builds capability in people. It builds confidence. It connects you to something authentic. And these days, with so much insanity, so much that's not real, we need this stuff more than ever. So yeah, it's there's no shortage of stuff to get me up in the morning and get to work. That's for sure.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And if you were to really like boil it down to, you know, what is Mark most concerned about, you know, this year and looking out into the future? Is there one thing that you are like, man, we really need to get our asses into gear here?
Wow. that's the crazy thing about the current moment we're in, is that we're getting like flooded with 1,000 different things. And so you're kind of speaking to a larger challenge that I think everybody's probably feeling right now. And you alluded to this a second ago, just the fact that it's a fire hose of stuff. And it's so hard to be able to process any of it, let alone all of it. And so because of that, most of us just ignore it all, because like we can't, like we go crazy trying to figure it all out. And so you just can't. So you have to kind of just bury your head in dealing with, just my family or just my work or just my thing. And then it all goes above and over your head. So yeah, if I had to boil it down to one thing, probably of all the challenges facing, hunting and fishing right now, it's probably the attacks on public lands that are top priority in this moment. This always changes, right? There's always going to be different pressures related to like challenges facing hunting and fishing. Sometimes the greatest challenges will be like hunter rights that you talked about, firearm rights, the opportunities to be able to hunt and fish. That happens sometimes. And then there'll be like this pendulum of that. Sometimes we're going to have greater worries on that front, sometimes less. And then the same thing is true when it comes to like attacks on or challenges facing environmental protections, wildlife protections, public land protections. And that's going to go up and down, up and down. Right now, we're in an upswell of those pressures on public lands. And it's coming in many, many different directions. So it's hard to kind of pin down any one specific thing. But I would say public lands mostly, last summer, there was the big push to actually sell public lands. And hunters and anglers, you were part of it. So many people were a part of, raising our voices and saying, hey, this is not going to fly. And selling public lands is very easy to wrap your head around. Like selling off these lands, bad. That's very simple to understand. No. It's very simple to stand up and speak out against that. What we're seeing now and what was happening last year and is continuing to happen this year, but ramping up, is instead of, outright trying to sell them, instead it's basically removing protections from them, removing the plans put in place to manage them so that they can be more easily, used to make money from. And so that's always been a part of a lot of our public lands. Most of our public lands are multiple use, which is amazing. That's one of the really great things about them, is that they can be utilized for many different things. The trick over the last 150 years has been like trying to balance that and doing it in a careful way so that it's sustainable, so that all of these uses have a place and they're not, damaging the opportunities for the other uses. So there is extractive use, oil and gas and logging and grazing. That's part of it for many of these places. But doing that in a sustainable, careful way is how we want that to be done. But then also conservation of wildlife and recreation opportunities and wildlife habitat. That is also part of what these places are supposed to be used for. And right now, there's just this big swing to try to maximize the extraction opportunities on these places, minimizing the conservation and recreation uses. So that's where I think I'm most concerned is like the many different examples of that happening right now. And because it's this management stuff and protections that are applied to public lands, it's not simple. It's not as obvious as, hey, we're going to sell them. It's more like, hey, we're going to use this complicated thing called a Congressional Review Act, and we're going to remove this complicated thing called a resource management plan. And, there's like 1,000 different acronyms and all this wonky stuff that no average hunter or angler has time to learn about. And
meant
understand.
To confuse you, probably.
Yeah. And so then because of that, most of us don't know what's going on. Most of us don't say anything about it, and then it just happens. And then 10 years from now, these public lands are vastly different, way fewer wildlife, way fewer hunting or recreational opportunities or whatever it might be. And we don't know any better. We didn't even know it happened. We're just living in a diminished world because of it. And so that's the thing I'm worried about the most right now is how do we address the most dangerous of those and try to shine a light on those most concerning examples so that, when my kids or maybe your future kids, when the audience's families someday get the chance to hopefully go out and see these places, hopefully they're still there, intact, healthy, and thriving, as they should be. And there's a lot of like specific examples of that going on, but that overarching idea would be the single greatest theme of what I'm concerned about right now.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about there, at least for me, is one of the most complicated ones that are very case by case basis, because like me personally, I'm not against extracting resources. And I think, having those multiple use for public lands, I'm a fan of that in a way, to be able to help, our own personal or our own economy, and being able to, and honestly, things like logging, like that does multiple use things as far as it's helping the habitat. It's in a sustainable way, and that is planned out the way they used to do it in the 1920s and 30s in Pennsylvania, where they just clear cutted everything. Not good, but there's things that I think are good and can come good from it. I've seen places, I've hunted around places where there's a ton of oil and gas wells that are done, at least from what I can see, right, and it's not causing any issues to the wildlife we're living there. Now, where I have an issue with it and where I've seen it go bad is where you put it at the beginning of a watershed or something, where there can be, because so my background before I did this full time, I was environmental in manufacturing, so like I understood pollution, water, waste, all those things, and I can tell you that as clean as you want to do things, it's not like the way that it was before. And there's ways of managing that risk and minimizing it and helping. And I should take that back a little bit. There have been situations where I've seen the land be put back together as good and helped some of the stuff there, like especially in areas where there's coal and some acid mine, drainage from the past work. They've done work to be able to help make that better and improve it. But there's where it takes me, I feel like, more research to even like, it's not as black and white as like selling off public lands, like no to me. But like if I see something come up, and there's been a bunch of those recently, like that you'd kind of alluded to there, it's like it takes me a little bit. I want to understand it before talking about it, because no matter what, whoever's for or against a certain thing is going to tell you, why that is, but really trying to dive into it. And like recently, it's been the Boundary Waters situation where I've been trying to understand and learn and look at all of those things. And I think from my own, I've learned enough about it and research with it that I'm not for that. Like, I think that's a very dangerous move. And actually, I thank you for a lot of it. I got, I listened to some podcasts that you had talked about those specifics and understood it, and understanding that even those resources that we'd be getting aren't even coming back to the United States to begin with.
Yeah.
Like that's to me, it's like, what? Like that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But do you understand kind of my long-winded rant of like complications with it?
100%. I don't think you're alone in that either. And you're right. Like there's a million different folks out there trying to point our attention at a million different things. And they mostly probably are well-meaning. They all maybe believe that their cause is really important and their perspective is really important, and that's fine and fair and good. But everyone's got a perspective. Everyone's got a bias. Everyone's got a spin. Everyone comes at these things from somewhere different. And so I think your approach is a really good one, which is don't take any one headline, don't take any one call to action as gospel truth. Take it as a starting point, as a question, and then go and do your own research, dig in. And again, like no one has time to explore every one of these single things. But if there's something that comes up that you're hearing about enough, or that intrigues you, or that is somehow, relevant to the things you really care about, go in and try to dig around a little bit. Try to read about this from multiple sources, from different perspectives, as you did, Beau. And I think that can help you understand, like, A, am I getting the best information? B, do I understand this from like a well-rounded perspective? And then C, like, is this a thing that I actually should care about and engage on? There's some things that just maybe aren't in my lane. Maybe it's like, there's some stuff going on. There's lots of things in the world that are important or concerning, but they're just like not my lane. And me trying to do something about it really isn't going to make an impact. And so I'm not going to like speak out on everything on social media or in my podcast or on my platforms. It wouldn't make sense. So I try to really be, take some time to think about, where does my time and attention and voice actually have the chance to make a difference? Whether that's just in signing a petition or emailing my senators, or talking about it on social media, or talking about it on a podcast, or writing something about it. So yeah, I went through the exact same process as you did with the Boundary Waters. But for me, it started in like 2018 or something like that. I started hearing about this when the mining issue was beginning to get hot back then. And I decided, I keep on hearing about this thing. This seems concerning, but I don't really understand it. So I started reading all these articles, and I started talking to some people that lived up there, and, started understanding like, okay, yeah, this is really concerning. This is a type of mine that historically has always led to significant water pollution. And this mine is being proposed right on the border of this incredible water-filled wilderness, and it's upstream of it. So if it does pollute, like all the other mines like this would pollute, it would flow into this Boundary Waters region. And then I thought to myself, man, I keep hearing how incredible this place is, how special it is, how iconic it is. This seems really dangerous, but I've never been there. I don't really know anything about it. Maybe I should go see it for myself. And so then I ended up planning a trip there, and I went and did a week-long canoe trip, deer hunt, grouse hunt, fishing trip, and it blew my mind. It was everything people said and more. We just had a unreal trip. And so coming out of that, then I could say, okay, yeah, full send. This place is really special. Everything I learned about this project already seemed concerning. And now I know in a real way what's at stake. So now I'm very fully comfortable, engaging on it, discussing it, and hopefully finding a way to help. I'm not able to go see and do something in every one of these special places, but I try to find ways when I think it's, really important to try to ground myself in that, or to have some kind of personal experience there. But, to your point, we can't all do that everywhere. So we've got to kind of pick our shots, pick the things that matter to us. So, the Boundary Waters was a place I went and saw and really cared about. The area around, where I live in Michigan, of course, is personal. The area around the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, where I spend our summers, my family has spent our summers there for like 15 years now or whatever. That's really personal to me. So those are the kinds of places where I feel a deep connection, where I know something, where I feel like, hey, this is something I'm deeply invested in. And each one of us has our own version of that. So I think that can maybe help us kind of focus our attention, is in those things that we know, love, care about, or have a connection to. That can make it a little bit easier to focus our attention and try to make sense of this crazy world right now.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes it so difficult, especially with the things that are coming from the federal level, is because it can be localized, but when you don't have that frame of reference, you haven't been there, you don't see it, it may not trigger to you as something that's as important of it. Yeah. It's like, man, you look at something personally. Just recently, I was involved with Pennsylvania was introducing putting gun season in during the rut, and I was like, absolutely, you should have seen the people that came out of the woodworks for that. It's like, I did a podcast on it, gave my thoughts, the reasons why it didn't, and it was like, and was able to ended up finding out that the actual, the board of commissioners watched the podcast and went through it and reached out to me. And it was like, there was a real impact that you could see amazing from doing that at a state and even more so at a local level. But it's harder on the federal side to see it unless you have, people from everywhere getting into it. So that's where it's like, it's so, which I think that also, this is just my opinion, but I think like being involved on a state and local level is so important, but you can't totally turn a blind eye to what's going on elsewhere, because that can come right back to you, and it could be too late by the time that it does, depending on what it is.
Yeah, no, you're right. And sometimes it's, sometimes we in the media overly focus on the national issues, in many cases because we have national audiences and because the national stuff is just kind of where the most attention lies, and we all get kind of sucked into that. But to your point, it is harder to influence things at a national level. That's just a big, big picture of people that are involved in it, and sometimes the decisions are made far away. So you're right, on the state level, on the local level, just by default, you have more influence. You have more opportunity to engage. There's not as much noise. There's not as many different layers in between you and decision makers. So it's a really, really important thing to remember, is that we have, we can make a really big difference on that level. So paying attention to what's going on locally, and it's hard now because, local news sources and local journalism and all that has disappeared so much. So, you got to kind of figure out where you can tap in there. And maybe it's with, local chapters or branches of conservation organizations. That's one thing. Following your local game commissions, your state game commissions and those meetings and different things, every state's different, but that's one thing you can do. But yeah, that should not be forgotten. There's real work that can be done there, and not a lot of people. I mean, like you said, sometimes there's like big issues that get people out of the woodwork, but I think that most people would be surprised by how few folks actually engage on some of these things. And if you are willing to point some attention there and rally, folks around it, you can like change things dramatically. And that's encouraging. That's really needed these days, because so much and everything feels like it's outside of our control. Yeah. If you can find a place where you can really make a difference, not only can you change that, situation, but that just is like fuel. That's rocket fuel to like fill yourself back up with hope that you can do something and change the world a little bit and make things a little bit better. And I think we can all benefit from having a little bit of that in our lives.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And this was one of those situations for me of like seeing this specific thing get, shot down, and they were like, hey, this is overwhelming support. We heard from you guys, but everyone was like, and it's not just me that was talking about it by any means, but like when I started talking about it, they're like, no one's going to listen to you. No one's going to, listen to any of us saying through these things. This was like a perfect example where you can, but you can't just yell and throw fits and scream. I mean, do some research, explain why and give it in a good way. And it's helped me a lot with conservation organizations that have been out there, whether it's BHA, whether it's HAL, whether it's, name any of the, ones that do. I mean, there's quite a few that do great work that make it easier for you with helping, even drafting emails and letters. Now, I always like it when you can, have a little bit of a personal story, but obviously that requires additional time. So at least you can do that and, help make an impact at, say a federal level or other things by reducing that barrier to entry to have your voice be heard, because I do think it makes a difference. And we saw that last summer. It took a lot of people, and there was a lot of people from not just hunters and anglers from everywhere to really, get that thing going. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm a little bit more encouraged from a positive standpoint that we can make differences if we stand together on things. There's always things that, we're not going to agree on. There's not a person, I think, in this world that, we could go back and forth and we're going to agree on everything on. That's just the way that it is. But when we find things that we commonly, that are special to us, I think that is really important to team up on those things.
Yeah, that's the silver lining of what happened last summer, was that it really showed the impact we can have when we do exactly what you just said. Put aside those differences, focus on what we have shared interest and cause around, stand united, speak out loud and clear for what we care about. And, we're not going to win every time, but sometimes we will. And that was a great, great example of that. And I think it also armed people not only with the sense that that we can make a difference, but also that that you have the capability to do it. I think a lot of people historically maybe have been intimidated by the idea of calling a senator's office or writing a letter or showing up at a rally at a state capitol or something. I don't do that kind of thing, or I couldn't do that. That sounds kind of scary. That seems like what a crazy activist would do, or something like that, right? And I think a lot of people realized last summer, oh, you know what? I've heard 1,000 people tell me to call my senator. I guess I'm going to try. This is scary, but I'm going to give it a shot. And maybe someone's going to yell at me on the other side of the line, or maybe someone's going to debate me. I'm not going to know what to say, but I guess I'll try it. And then they did it. And then they realized there's nobody that's going to yell at you. There's nobody that's going to question you. There's nobody that's going to debate you on the facts. There's just some sad little intern who's going to take down the notes as you talk to them, or there's going to be a voicemail that records what you have to say. And it's so easy. It takes 1 minute. and there's no skin off your back. It's not scary, but it does help. Or maybe you decided to go to some, public land rally or something, and you were worried you were going to look like a crazy person, but instead you got there and you saw a bunch of other people in camo that love the same stuff that you loved and talk like you talk and do the same things you do. And we're like, oh, wow, look at us. We're here. This isn't so crazy. We're actually standing up for this thing that we really care about. This isn't nuts. This is actually important. And it's cool that we're here together doing this. I think some version of those examples happened for thousands, maybe millions of people across America last year. And because of that, I think we are better armed now this year and next and going forward to stand up for whatever the next big issues are going to be for us individually. And that's good news.
Yeah, I think that is very, very positive. Kind of along those, and we'll come back to the boundary water stuff here in a little bit, but I want to, while we're on this kind of topic of, being involved in access and stuff, and you're talking about public lands, being, taken away, or from the standpoint of them being infected, if you want to put it that way. What about, one of the other things that I've seen, and this wasn't something that personally impacted me a lot, so it took a little bit for me to really see this across the country, but are private lands that were either previously open to public hunting, whether it was through, just permission, or what I've seen a lot in the East were large timber companies, or oil and gas companies, coal companies that used to allow public hunting, to just go and explore, now have become, leased up or, sold off or whatever it was that is now limiting, because we have less hunters now, but most people don't believe that because it seems crowded in particular places, but it's, an access thing. And I think that is something that I think is really difficult to solve, but this became real to me in a couple different scenarios. But back in December, I'd put out a podcast about I'd leased a piece of property in West Virginia. Man, did I get hammered for talking about it was the good, the bad, and ugly of leasing hunting lands, and it turned into this whole ordeal. And I had one particular guy that was pretty much threatening me that if I ever came, to West Virginia, there'd be some issues. So I was like, all right. So I was like, you know what? I was pretty fired up. I was like, I got in the comments. I said, hey, here's my email. Shoot me an email with your concerns. Let's talk about it. We ended up having a really good conversation, and it stemmed from years and years of land that person and his family was able to hunt that got diminished. And I can understand that, like totally can understand that. There was a lot of property that I used to hunt as a kid that was open to public hunting, that was timber company property that are now hunting leases. And I'm not here to demonize hunting leases like that. I understand the part you work hard and you want to have a place that you can go to, that you don't have to battle other people and everything else. Totally get that. I'm not demonizing that. But what are your thoughts on all of that? And are there any things that can be done, from a state level or federal level, from, what you've seen to be able to help either slow that curve or maybe even be able to save some properties in that respect?
Yeah, it is a doozy. And yeah, I think we're all feeling it in one way or another. I've had a number of permission properties that I used to be able to hunt that were sold or leased out from underneath me. And so I lost that access. All of my friends, I don't think I can think of any friend of mine who's serious about hunting who hasn't had something like that happen. So I get it. I feel it. I've also paid for leases myself for the same reasons like you did, right? If you have the opportunity, it sure would be nice to have a place that you could hunt given this new situation we're in. So I don't think it's like you can't put the genie back in the bottle. We can't rewind time. This is just the nature of the beast. This is where we're headed. While there are fewer hunters, there is a growing number of like really serious hunters. So more people take it seriously. I think that's true. I think that there's also all of the demographic trends that you mentioned where just like people are buying land for this more often. There are people coming from the city with money that they want to dedicate to these kinds of pursuits. There's more land being developed, so we're losing open space too. So all of these pressures are leading to these challenges. I think that I don't hold it against anyone that wants to buy land or lease land, right? It's natural. People are going to want to do that, and I'm not going to hold that against them. But I also think it is important that we try to find ways to preserve the opportunity to hunt for people that don't have those resources. So there's a few different things that I think can help us. Number one, this just reemphasizes the importance of what we led with, which was not selling off public lands. We simply cannot lose public lands given this rising access problem. We have to preserve what we have. So that's number one. Huge thing. That's why we need to keep on doing what we did last summer. We got to keep fighting for that because public lands are going to be more and more and more important as private land access disappears for more people. That thing is just going to continue happening. So we need to keep public land great because we're going to need it more than ever. That's number one. Number two, we should be doing whatever we can to help increase public land opportunities and actual land acreage. And probably the best tool we have for that is something called the Land and Water Conservation Fund. Have you ever heard of that one, Beau?
Yes, I have.
All right. So this is a good one for everyone to know about because it is, it's incredible. It's kind of a wonky acronym that's easy for people to not know about, but we all should try to remember this one. LWCF, the Land and Water Conservation Fund, is an incredible program that takes royalties from offshore oil leases, oil drilling. A percentage of all those dollars made from that goes into the Land and Water Conservation Fund every year. $900 million go into this fund every year. And those dollars specifically are to be used to acquire new public access, public lands, boat access sites, parks, trailheads, things like that. And that is increasing our public land base. That is leading to new acreage becoming open to people. That's probably the single greatest tool out there right now. It's unbelievable. It's leading to real new access opportunities, new hunting places, new fishing places. That's happening every single year. It's incredible. In 2020, the Great American Outdoors Act, which was signed by President Trump at the time, made that fund permanent. In the past, it had to be reauthorized over and over and over again. It made that fund permanent, and it was supposedly going to make that $900 million a year permanent. That was a big win. That was amazing. Hunters and anglers really helped make that happen. But now we're seeing some really fishy stuff happen with folks not actually assigning and giving the dollars that are supposed to be to these projects. So the 2025 list of Land and Water Conservation Fund projects. So these are the projects that are supposed to get some of that $900 million to buy new fishing access sites, to add a 400-acre parcel here, a 1,000-acre parcel here, etc. Those dollars are being held up and not being given to the projects that were approved for those dollars. The list in 2026 that has been put together and that's supposed to be submitted, for whatever reason, is not being sent out. So there's some wonky stuff going on with LWCF. They're seemingly trying to hold it up, and that is raising some alarm bells. So I would just tell everyone to stay tuned. If you see something about LWCF in the news, read it. Let's stay abreast of what's happening there. Let's make sure that this program continues to be funded the way it's supposed to be, and that these projects keep moving forward as they're supposed to be, because this is about the only way that we're going to add to our public land opportunities. There's some really big things too. There's a project in, is this Colorado or New Mexico? I'm going to get this wrong. But there was a project I read about recently where it's 20,000 acres or something, really substantial, big chunks of public land that would be added to our public land system by way of this fund. And so the way LWCF usually works is, there'll be some project where a bunch of different people all chip in to help make this purchase for our public land system. So there'll be an LWCF grant Then there might be like the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation would chip in some money, and maybe the Nature Conservancy would chip in some money, and local groups would chip in money, and all these different people would come together to be able to add this to our public land system. Something like this actually just happened up in northern Michigan, not too far from my family deer camp. I think an 6 to 8,000 acre chunk was added to our state forest up in the northeast part of lower Michigan. Incredible, wild place, big woods, bunch of streams, trout streams, incredible wild stuff for northern Michigan was just added that now I can go and hunt and fish because of dollars from the Land and Water Conservation Fund. So huge, amazing program there. We got to keep it functioning. We got to keep it alive. That's number 2. Number 3, there is a program that is a part of something called the Farm Bill. And the Farm Bill sounds like something that wouldn't be relevant to hunters and anglers, but it actually is. There's a huge chunk of this big piece of legislation that is all conservation related. And there's a program in there called the Voluntary Hunter Access something. Basically what it is it's a set of dollars that's given to states every year for hunter access programs. So this is how Kansas's walk-in hunting program is funded. This is how Minnesota's walk-in hunting program is funded. This is how a number of these different public access programs that hunters benefit from, where you can go and hunt private lands as, a public opportunity. That's where those dollars come from. That's how those landowners are compensated. So pay attention to, I'm going to Google this so I make sure I get it right. It's VHA, Farm Bill, VHA. I think it's VHA HIP. It's too wonky. Well, forgive me because I'm going to get this acronym wrong. But either way, pay attention to the Voluntary Hunter Access program within the Farm Bill. That's something we've talked about on Wired Hunt in our Farm Bill podcast. Maybe I can send you this link later to get some more details on it.
Yeah.
I apologize that I'm not remembering all the details right now, but that is basically the one major program that funds getting access on private land. So those 3 things: keep our public lands public, support the Land and Water Conservation Fund to add new lands to our public lands, and 3, support the VHA program within the Farm Bill so we get these new private land public access opportunities. Those are 3 things I think that every one of us can be involved in, and that, a simple phone call to your senator on all 3 could help. So 1, keep our public lands public. Hey, number 2, are you supporting the Land and Water Conservation Fund? That's really important for me and other hunters and anglers. And 3, hey, we got to get that new Farm Bill passed, and the hunter access part of it is really important to me personally. Those are 3 ways that we could all tackle this in a relatively simple way that really would help.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful to be able to put that all out there and have, being able to understand it. 'Cause even the Land and Water Conservation Fund, like that is something when you asked me if I, knew about it and I heard about it, I have heard about it. I've known about it, but I didn't know some of those details that you put there. Like that was really helpful to be able to understand. And I've seen walk-in programs, and they're all different. Pennsylvania has ones, and I can't remember the name and what they call it. But actually, when I had mentioned on that podcast about Pennsylvania and me talking about access as being one of the things I think is, as important, if not more important than opportunity from season dates and all these other things. But Pennsylvania actually does a pretty dang good job across the boards. They're acquiring state game lands every year, being able to help with that. They do a pretty good job with it. I think when I looked up some of the stats last night, there's over 2 million acres of private lands enrolled in their private access programs in places. So there's definitely good things that can be done there. Agencies can lease access to particular places, conservation easements. I know of a particular property that I hunt, that I've been to, that's in an easement, that I was talking to the person who manages the land. He gave me the whole background on it. And it's like pretty much for the lifetime, even as they sell, hunters and anglers always have access to this property. And I was like, that's pretty awesome to be able to have. One of the big things, even for people that don't care to lease it, that are like, I talked to a farmer. I was in Iowa hunting this past fall, and I was on a piece of public, and I ended up running into the neighboring farmer, and we had a great conversation. He was a super nice guy, and he's like, "Hey, you shoot a deer?" He's like, you just come to the house. He's like, grab the side by side. If it, dies on my property, come grab it. And I was like, "Oh, I appreciate that." And I was like, "So would you, let me maybe hunt all your property?" And he was like, he's like, "Man, I would love to, but the liability of that, like, I just have made it clean and just said, nobody actually hunting on it. Don't care for recovery." He's like, "If it's in a real bad spot, I'll bring my tractor in and get it out for you, but I can't allow you to hunt it from a liability standpoint." Like, and I don't know, maybe some states are doing this, but even like, are there ways where states can, offer liability protections to landowners to allow, public access? I understand, especially in like the big buck states, it's really difficult to compete with leasing prices as far as any incentive to be able to give landowners, because they're just, some of the prices are crazy. But I feel like, from liability protection, conservation easements, the things that you had mentioned, there are definitely things that are, maybe even stacking incentives, tax incentives, federal tax incentives for access, like those types of things can help. For me, it was like, okay, if I were to get involved with it, which I want to, is like, all right, I need to have a clean, like, understanding and what I'm even asking for from these, whether it's state agencies or whatever, to make sure that I'm asking for the right things and I'm not just complaining to complain. And that's, I think that is, I think that's important. And I appreciate you walking through the three things that you mentioned there as well.
Yeah. And also I double checked on my acronym so I can confirm for you that Farm Bill program. The acronym is VPA HIP. I know, too many letters. And that stands for the Voluntary Public Access and Habitat Incentive Program. So basically, this takes dollars that then states can use to pay landowners to let you hunt. So again, that's a huge one. VPA HIP, VPA HIP would be a great one to try to get all of our lawmakers on board with continuing to fund at current levels or higher, because it's only going to become more and more important. And then on your question about liability, Beau, I've never used this and then never dove into it personally too terribly deeply, so I don't know all the details. But I do know that the National Deer Association has some kind of hunting liability insurance that you can get pretty cheap, that you can basically put in place that then could protect landowners and you from any kind of liability issues. You'd have to read up on it a little bit more to understand all the details of it, but I know they have something like that might help solve that problem for people because I've heard other people say the same thing, like, "Hey, this landowner doesn't want me there because of liability." And I think this program is supposed to help you deal with that and make those landowners feel more comfortable. So it might be worth checking that out over on the Deer Association page.
I would say I'm sure Nick will text me after this and be like, "Hey, you didn't know about that?" And I can see it.
And yeah, like I said, I don't know all the details of it, but I think that might help with that.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'll definitely take a look into that particularly. But yeah, I just think like, and I think it's okay not to have all the solutions to these problems, but I think like us talking about some of these things may help others be able to, they do some research and find other opportunities and bring them to us, and we have platforms that can help make a difference in it. But like when you said the VPA HIP, so I mean I know there's state, I'm trying to think of a state that I just recently, I don't remember if it was a Western state I applied for, something where you have to you pay, I think it's like $5 or $10 when you apply, or you buy a license that you're helping fund that program. But
yeah. And, I think to kind of piggyback off that, Beau, we are all, whether we have a platform or we're 18 years old and have an Instagram account, or we're 25 and hate the internet, whatever your position is, we all have like the ability to do something. We're all capable. It's going to look different for everyone. Everyone's going to have a different interest or different level of, information of what they understand or experience. But this is not above any of us. Like, this is not beyond any of us. This is not something that's not for you or me. This is something every one of us can do a little bit on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that can be looked at in one way as kind of like a drag. Like, you might look at that as like, oh God, Mark's saying that I have this obligation to do this thing, and this is, just some other old guy telling me to do something, and that's a real pain in the butt, and this is annoying. Or you could look at it as like, holy crap, there's an opportunity for me. I can actually do something that helps. I can actually do something that's going to make sure that this thing I love continues. That's exciting. I think that's how I would look at it.
Yeah.
We like as hunters to brag about the fact that, we're the original conservationists. We like to brag about the fact that we fund conservation with our license purchases. And all of that is true, but that's all like hanging our hat on what the people before us did. And they did great work. They put in place these programs that fund conservation. They agreed to tax themselves with the purchase of hunting gear and fishing gear that funds conservation. They were willing to say, oh, wow, we're killing too many of these animals. We need to put in place regulations that put quotas and seasons in place. They understood that, oh, geez, we have destroyed habitat. We've destroyed the places these ducks live. We've destroyed the landscape that these turkeys need. So now we better do some work to fix these things. Let's help restock turkeys. Let's help replant forests. Let's help do this hard work. They did that stuff. And now we're enjoying the benefits of that. But with that comes like we talked about earlier, we've got to grab that baton, and now it's our turn. And so that's exciting to me. Like, that, I think, for all of us should be like a fire underneath your back end to carry on that. Like, there's some pressure on us, man. They did good work before. How do we make sure that 25 years from now or 50 years from now, they're saying the same thing about us? And we all can do it. It's going to be different, but we all can do our thing. And that's exciting. That's important. Let's make sure that we're not the original conservationists just by paying our $25 a year or whatever for the license. Let's go above and beyond that a little bit. Let's, maybe it's planting a tree on your own back 40. Maybe it's, showing up at some kind of event and speaking out and sharing your perspective on an upcoming hunting regulation. Maybe it's calling your senator and saying, hey, protect the Land and Water Conservation Fund. Don't sell my public lands. Maybe it's taking out a new hunter and teaching them about why this stuff's so great, teaching them to hunt, teaching them about how they can be a conservationist. It's going to be different for all of us, but I think it's really exciting that all of us have that chance. And man, I'm stoked that people like you are helping lead the charge.
Yeah, well, no, I think that was a really good way of framing it. I think we have so much opportunity, like you said, to make an impact. And the thing is, in the past, like, yeah, things are changing. That things are always changing, and the way technology is improving and changing our lives. I mean, it seems like every 5 years there's major changes on how we live because how quickly technology is coming, and we can't change that. Like, that's not. So how can we adapt to these things and continually to protect the things that we love, that are, things that our ancestors have been doing for a long, long time? How can we still maintain those things, but adapting to the current state of how things are going? I don't know. I feel like I see it, and I know social media is, I think, an incredible thing, and it's also just a absolute black hole of negativity in the same regards. But like, I tend to look at things as like, from an opportunity standpoint, less of like a doom and gloom all the time, of like, hey, okay, here's an opportunity for us to get involved and be able to help change those things. Like, and again, like something about, say for example, we just mentioned leasing, like that's not going away, and that's not going to be the case. But how can we help with some of the stuff we have? How can we protect the lands that we do have available? What are, those are the types of things I think that we have an opportunity to continually improve and move forward. Because that's, I just think that I think we have a really unique opportunity today to be able to do so.
Yeah. Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
For folks out there who are listening to this and thinking to themselves, oh yeah, maybe I can do something like that. Maybe I should do something like that. I would suggest looking at it in two different ways in trying to do two different things related to this. I would look at individual action, and then I would look at collective action. And I would try to pick and choose a little bit of both. And I'll explain what I mean by this and why. Individual action would be something that you can do like in the here and now, solely by yourself, that could make a difference. That might be, if you own land, that could be doing some kind of actual on the ground work on that land, trying to reforest it or put in native prairie or remove invasive species or whatever it is, but actually, doing something tangible today. Or maybe if you don't own land, maybe that's volunteering on public land, showing up for a voluntary trash pickup day or a river restoration or removing fences on public land or something like that. Or maybe it means just, changing purchase decisions, changing something in your daily life that helps you make a little bit less impact on the environment or wildlife or whatever it might be. But finding something that nobody else has control over but you, where you can make a tangible difference today or tomorrow or next week. That actually makes a difference right away, so that's good. But then B, that is like soul refilling. When you can do something yourself with your own two hands or your own decision or your own money or whatever it is, and you did it yourself and you did it now, and things are different now because of it. As we talked about earlier, there's so much outside of our hands. There's so much hitting us all the time from all over the place. Everything's changing. Everything's crazy. Everything's, way out there, that when you can actually do something yourself today that does impact the world a little bit, that just like fills you with a reservoir of new energy and hope. And we need that right now, right? And I think by doing that, that snowballs and it builds. And so if you plant a tree today, that fills you with this energy and this sense of, oh, wow, I did something good. Maybe I can do a little more. And maybe 2 weeks from now, because you all of a sudden have this little bit of sense of, I'm the guy that I do this kind of thing. Maybe 2 weeks from now, maybe you then volunteer and do the trash pickup. And then if you do that, well, oh, wow, I actually made a difference doing that. And that was fun. And I met up these other people that like to do this stuff, and they invited me to be a part of this organization. Well, maybe I'll do that. And so that stuff grows and grows and grows. And it gives you this energy, and it builds community, and it builds this sense of agency that, hey, I can make a difference. That's really important. That then gives you the energy and the optimism and the growing ability to then participate in collective action, which is when you're a part of our larger group of people trying to make a difference, which is like the stuff we talked about that we did last summer, like working as a part of this huge group of people to rally support to stop the sale of public lands, or to support some new wildlife policy, or to stop bad management decisions, or whatever it is. That kind of collective action requires all of us being a part of a group, raising our voices, elevating the conversation, and doing that over and over and over again. But that kind of stuff can sometimes feel kind of out there. It can kind of sometimes feel like it's soft and intangible because we don't always win. We don't always get the outcomes we want. So that's why I think you need both. You need to have like the tangible individual, and then you need to have that collective bigger picture stuff, and they build off of each other. But I think if you do only one or the other, you're sometimes, you're not able to make as big of a difference, but B, you sometimes can get lost in it. So I would suggest individual action and collective action. And always remember, there's two lines that I really like. One is that the greatest cure for depression is action. So anytime you're feeling bad about the world, anytime you're feeling bad about the future of hunting and fishing or wildlife or your favorite piece of public land or whatever, anytime that kind of stuff's bringing you down, remember action. And then secondly, another line that I really like is that hope is action. So again, like if you need that hope, if you need that sense of, oh, I can make a difference, if you're missing that, the easiest way to change that is to do something, is to find something, any tiny little thing, some next best step, some small way today you can make things a little bit better. And if you do that, it creates hope. It removes and eases depression. It builds a sense of, hey, things can be a little bit better. And I think hunters and anglers, we are innately we are built for hope. we are built to be optimists. If you go out there and sit in a tree for 12 hours a day, you better have some optimism. You better have some hope, right? If you're going to sit in a boat or wade in a river for hours on end, trying to find where that bass is or where that trout is, like there's got to be an optimist in there. So we are built for this kind of thing. Like we are the best out there in the world to tackle this kind of stuff. We just need to repurpose that drive and optimism that we've used to chase deer with a bow or catch fish on a fly or pull walleye out with a spinning rod, whatever it is. Like, let's take that skill set we have and we're damn good at it, and let's repurpose it to make sure we have these things in the future. We can do it. We've done it in the past, and now it's our turn.
Yeah, that is an incredible way to be able to put it. And I also will say there's different. Everyone's in a different place. So there's people that have more money than time. There's people that have more time than money. There's people that don't have a whole lot of either. But all of those things can help as far as like, especially people that are, say, extremely busy. They're running a business, doing things, and it's like, oh man, it's hard to, give up X amount of time for it. Well, maybe you can help on the financial side to help fund it, or you don't have that. You can do more of the boots on the ground type of things. And at least from what I've learned is like, whenever you're doing anything where you feel like you're actually having an impact on not just yourself, but others and other people, the environment, the, animals that you love to pursue, any of that stuff, that gives you a sense of purpose and happiness that you can derive from that is difficult to be able to explain. And once you do it, if you went out and you did, say, just for the example, because you brought it up, a trash pickup on a piece of public land that you had, if you don't feel good after that you did that, like you will. I'm just going to say that, like, you'll feel good about doing that. And I think that there's, I think that was, I'm glad that the way that you framed that and brought it up in the ways that any of us, doesn't matter your financial situation, whatever, can have an impact.
Yeah, that's so true. And like, as you mentioned earlier, I sit on the board of directors for some conservation organizations, and it's so illustrating what you just said when you look at the background of some of these people and like what they bring to the table. Like one of these groups I'm in, there's someone on there who's a lawyer. And so the way they can contribute is they understand law and that kind of stuff. And so they can just provide insight on that. Then there's somebody who has like a communications background. And so they're able to like provide this group ideas and suggestions when it comes to how to reach people with your media and communications. And then there's somebody on these board of directors who has financial resources. And so they can help fund, and they know other people they can fundraise with, and they know how to speak to these people. There's another person on there who's just a great photographer. And so they can bring to the cause their photography and their friends that are photographers that might donate photos. And there's somebody else who is a journalist. And so they can bring to bear their experience as a writer and, communicating about these things. And so like, just like you said, Beau, it's such a huge, important point. We all have our own unique thing we can bring to this. And so this doesn't have to be like a cookie cutter thing for anyone. Think about what you have to offer. We all have something unique and it's valuable, and it can be repurposed for these causes. And I think that's exciting. That's great to think about and to consider. Yeah.
All right. Let's wrap this up with the last topic, and then I'll hit you with one more question after that. But boundary waters, give like an overview of what's going on there. We touched on it earlier, but like what is going on? What is the reason for concern, and then how to act?
All right. So the simplest version of this is that there is a foreign-owned mine being proposed on the border of the Boundary Waters Wilderness. The Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness is like a 1.1 million acre, just water-filled wonderland up in northern Minnesota. It's a massive swath of forests, lakes, and rivers, all interconnected. You can canoe all through this million-acre swath of wilderness. There's black bears, wolves, moose, whitetails, grouse, smallmouth bass, pike, walleye, all sorts of fish. It's nuts. It's incredible. Like I mentioned earlier, a wild, wild place, and very, very water-centric. So this sulfide or copper mine, this kind of mine, as I mentioned earlier, 100% of the other instances of this kind of mine have caused pollution. Where this proposed mine would be is just upstream of the Boundary Waters Wilderness and the Rainy River watershed. So if this mine were to leak, were to have some kind of pollutive issue, as every single other one has, it would go and enter this watershed and flow down into the Boundary Waters Wilderness area, possibly impacting a massive swath of this water-filled area. So obviously, very dangerous for fish and wildlife species of all kinds, let alone for the humans that recreate there, spend time, drink that water, swim in that water, canoe in that water, all sorts of concerns there. So because of that, for years and years and years, this was debated. There was all sorts of different environmental impact studies done, and hunters and anglers and outdoors people of all kinds provided public comment and input and said, hey, we're not against mining of all kinds. We're not against resource extraction on public lands, but this is simply the wrong mine in the wrong place. This is like a very, very risky place to put a mine like this. It's just not the right spot and time to do this. And so because of that, there was a massive majority of people saying no. In 2023, something was put in place called a mineral withdrawal that effectively said we cannot have this kind of mine for 20 years around this area. So this mine was banned for the next 20 years there. There would be additional studies and things like that done over that 2-decade period, but that protection was put in place. What's happening now? So that's the state of things up until just recently. Last summer, the administration announced that they were going to do whatever they could to remove that and open up the track to get this mine on the path to moving forward. More recently, a couple weeks ago, a resolution was brought to the House of Representatives that would remove that mineral withdrawal. And I'm going to give you a little bit of like the wonky details here, but I'll also try to make it simple. They're using this thing called the Congressional Review Act to remove that protection. That would effectively take the mineral withdrawal off the table, and it would fast track the ability for the mine to happen. This is a bad idea for two reasons. Number one, it's a bad idea for all the things I just told you as far as why this would be the wrong mine in the wrong place and how risky it is. But it's also a bad idea from a national perspective, because the Congressional Review Act, the tool that they are proposing be used to remove this protection, has historically not been used to do this kind of thing. It's been used to change rules in the past. It's been basically like a veto that Congress could use if there's like a massive overreach or something that seems wrong from a ruling perspective. It has never been used to remove public land management plans or protections in this kind of way. The protection here, or the resource management plans that land managers put in place to manage public lands out west, like Bureau of Land Management plans, in careful, sustainable, multiple use ways. These are now being threatened with this congressional review, effectively veto. It's like a guillotine put over the head of all of these different public land protections, that if this could be used in the boundary waters like this, maybe it could be used for all of these other public land protections that have been put in place over decades. The way that I've looked at it is, and this is, I think, something that we hunters are very familiar with, ballot box biology, right? We all know that's a bad idea. When we have politicians putting a wildlife management policy up for vote, right? These, the management of wildlife, the management of wildlife populations of all kinds, that should be handled by the people who understand it, right? The biologists, the professional managers who take years and years to develop careful plans and utilize the science to manage our wildlife policy, right? That's the way we've always advocated for things as hunters and anglers. That's why we hate seeing wildlife policy being put on, ballot initiatives. This is kind of like that. This is saying, this careful management plan you guys put in place here for the boundary waters or these different areas out west where the CRA is being used, we're going to say, screw that. We're just going to do a majority vote in Congress to use the Congressional Review Act and wipe that off the table. That is what's being proposed. That's the national precedent this could set. And so that's why we're seeing like quite a really large and widespread rise of attention around this boundary waters issue, because it's impacting a really special place. And then it could also impact a lot of different places all over the nation. So it's doubly concerning, and it's really worth paying attention to for that reason. I hope I didn't get too in the weeds there, because this one with all those Congressional Review Acts and all that can get confusing.
That's really, really helpful for it. Now, as far as the action, as far as as far as timeline, and then where and how to take action.
Yeah, thank you for the reminder there. So it was introduced to the House and it passed in the House by pretty much a party line vote. So one Republican and one Democrat flip-flopped, but otherwise everyone voted with their party, and so it passed. What that means next is it moves on to the Senate, potentially. The Senate has not been introduced to the Senate yet. So there's two things that could happen here. One, if there's enough concern within the Senate, if they hear from enough people, if enough people call their senators and express concerns about this, there's a chance that behind the scenes, word gets out that this just is not a winnable issue and this is not worth pursuing and there's too much public opposition, and it never gets introduced to the Senate and it goes nowhere and this doesn't happen. That would be amazing. So that's one opportunity. The second thing that happens is that this eventually does get introduced to the Senate, and then we have a bigger fight because, right now the Senate could go either way. And then again, it's calling senators and trying to help them understand why this is an important issue and why they should be thinking about this in the way we might suggest. So either way, this goes to the Senate. It might be introduced, it might not, but one way or another, senators will be the ones who determine if this goes forward. If it passes the Senate, the president will sign it. He's expressed that he wants this mine to happen. And so we need to let folks know that, the hunting and fishing community and outdoor folks of all kinds have some really serious concerns about it. So what you can do is call or email your senators. Again, like I talked about, it's really simple. It is not hard to do. Nobody's going to argue with you. You can literally do it in 2 minutes. If you'd rather do an email, you can go to the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers website. That's backcountryhunters.org. They have a take action site where you can click on there and put in your address. It auto populates an email. It inputs the email addresses for your two senators. As you mentioned, Beau, it's great to add a little bit of personal story to it. The way these offices look at these letters and everything, there's going to be a pile of identical form letters. So the letters that are identical to each other that auto-populate like this, those all get put in a bucket, metaphorically, and they're paid attention to, but they're kind of paid attention to the least. And then there's another bucket, which would be customized letters where people put their own unique thoughts in there and unique ideas and experiences. And those matter a little bit more. And then you're going to have phone calls. Those matter a ton because those take a little more effort, and real people did it for sure. And they shared their real thoughts. So those matter a bunch. And then any real in-person engagement matters the very most. So that said, an email, if you're going to do an email, it would help to add some thought personally to it. And then the very best thing you could do probably for most people is call. And I'm going to give you a phone number real quick here. Oh, come on. Here it is. All right. So if you call the number 202-224-3121. So that's 202-224-3121. That is the number to get a hold of the U.S. Capitol. And it's very easy. You call that number. Either someone's going to actually pick up the phone or an automated bot responds. And it basically says say the senator you're trying to reach or the state you're trying to call about. And it will then direct you to your senator. So if you know the name of your senators, you just say it. If you don't know the name of the senators, you can just say, hey, Michigan. And then it will say, okay, your two senators are so-and-so, Peters and so-and-so, Slotkin. Who do you want to speak to? And then it will direct you to that office. And then, like I said, it's usually an intern or a voicemail. And you can just simply say something like, hey, I'm a hunter from Pennsylvania. I love to go hunt public land. I love to fish. Maybe you've been to the boundary waters. Maybe you haven't, but you might say, hey, I'd love to go up there someday. I understand this is a dangerous proposal. This mine seems like the wrong place to do it. I'm concerned about how this Congressional Review Act thing might impact my favorite piece of public land in Pennsylvania or Florida or Minnesota, I'd really appreciate you not supporting House Joint Resolution 140, which is what the House version of this bill was. There might be a different title for the Senate one when it comes out. But each and every one of us could do that. Each and every one of us could share a perspective on this. And this is one that, again, has local but also national ramifications. So it is one worth paying attention to. And the last thing I'll say, I've said too much. Sorry, Beau, I'm rambling.
You're good.
But if you want to learn more about this one, which, as you talked about, Beau, is a good idea to learn more personally, the Sportsman for the Boundary Waters website has a lot of information on this. That's a group that is protecting the boundary waters, but from a hunter angler perspective. And so that's just Google Sportsman for the Boundary Waters. That'll basically give you all the details of this mine. You can learn about this for yourself, understand it for yourself. As you mentioned, Beau, I also have done several podcasts about this issue too. So if you want to dive deep, that's another place. If you want to Google the Boundary Waters and Wired to Hunt, you'll find those. And yeah, dig a little bit deeper, and I think you'll see that this is probably one worth taking a little bit of action on.
Yeah, and I will also mention that I was one of those people in the past that was afraid to call to call in. I'm like, man, I don't know what am I going to say? Is this going to be hard? It's way easier than when I have to call Verizon Wireless to talk about, figure out why they increased my bill, and I've got to go through 9 channels. This is very simple. Like you said, you call. It's like, okay, where do you want this call to be directed? Even if you don't know exactly, they can help direct you to that. So like, it's very simple. You can do it in 3 or 4 minutes. Like, it's not a big deal but it can be a big deal from an impact standpoint. So yeah, highly recommend that. It's not as big as you're building it in your brain to be. So from making it hard, I guess, but
so true.
All right. So this is the last thing. We're going to wrap this up on a positive note. Mark, what gives you optimism right now? Like, when you look at the state of hunting, fishing, outdoors, access, public land, what gives you like, man, I feel pretty dang good about this?
I think, I kind of alluded to it earlier, but 2 things. Number 1, we have, we have been born into this most amazing place and opportunity in the world. Like, we're the luckiest people in the world that we were born here in America or live in North America and have this, wild array of animals and fish and still wild places and many opportunities to go out there and hunt and fish. Like, this is not normal for many people across the world. Like, we are very, very lucky. So we have this, another thing to take note of, like, it's very easy to feel like everything's going to shit, right? It's easy to hear all of these bad things going on, all of these threats, all of these concerns, all the negativity in the world. And there are bad things going on, no doubt. But at the same time, there's so much good. You step outside and go into a piece of public land or your own back 40, you go deer hunting or bass fishing or moose hunting or elk hunting or go on a backpacking trip. You can't go into one of these wild places outside and not realize how damn good we have it and how much is still worth fighting for. So just by virtue of that, just by virtue of how incredible these places are, how incredible it is to get to hunt or fish and engage with these things, like that in and of itself is a rocket fuel of unbelievable power that gives me a ton of hope, because this stuff is so good and we are so passionate about these pursuits that I know that builds within each and every one of us an enormous reservoir to do something to keep it around. That gives me hope. And then number 2, we talked about this already, but I will reiterate. Last summer, we saw the fact that energy and that reservoir of hope and passion, that can be used for good. It was proved that we can make a difference. It was proved to the world that these places matter to the American people. Our politicians are waking up to that little bit by little bit. They're realizing that taking a big crack at our public lands or wildlife, that is a political poison pill. There's still people trying to do it. There's some crazy folks out there. There's some people that don't care about the same things as we do. Of course, that's always going to be the case. But I think the world is waking up to the fact that this is a pretty darn bipartisan issue. This is a pretty darn important issue, both to rural people and urban people, hunters and tree hugging hippies. We all care about this stuff. We maybe have different ways of doing it, but we can stand together on this. And that is a scary thing to the people in power that want to sell these places or squeeze every dollar out of these places and animals and opportunities. Because when we stand together, it's really hard for them to get away with things in the dark of the night. So I am hopeful, because of the fact that we are optimists by nature as hunters and anglers, that we can use that power, we can use that on the ground experience, and then we can learn from last summer to keep carrying this thing forward. Because our fathers and grandfathers and great grandfathers and grandmothers and all those folks, they did it before us. We're living, we're walking in their footsteps now. We're walking in the footsteps of giants and living a dang good life because of it. And now we just have this really special opportunity to make that possible for our kids and our grandkids. And I can tell you, I'll do my best here to speak for my sons, Everett and Colton, that they will be very, very appreciative 25 years from now or 50 years from now if we all do that important work. And I think we will.
Yeah. I love that. I think that is very true. I feel the same way on the optimism in that front, and seeing everybody come together in a very divisive world, or what it seems like to be a very divisive world. Like, we can all come together on this, and that's very awesome. Yeah. To put it very simple, but yeah, I think we can keep moving on that. I always go back to, Mark, when you talked about going to these wild places and seeing it, like, I feel like when you're not in those places for a while, and I even can come to this, like right now in the wintertime, I'm staring at maps, I'm looking at these Western tag draws, and like where I'm going to be hunting. I think I'm going to get a pretty good tag somewhere this year, and I'm looking at the unit, and I'm e-scouting, I'm going through, I'm like, oh man, and then I start looking at, like, the slope angle and like the actual distances of things, and I can just picture when I get dropped there of how much bigger all that is going to be than what it looks like on a map. And I think that when you look, and I'm like, as far as I can see in any direction and way further, I'm allowed to go walk and hunt and camp and do all these things. Like, man, that is pretty special.
That is the truth. Amen to that, brother.
All right. Well, Mark, let's wrap this up. And would you mind letting people know where they can follow along with your stuff, and give any recommendations, links, things like that, and I can also put them in the show notes. Yeah.
Well, on social media, Wired to Hunt is my Instagram handle. That's the place that I'm most active, where I talk about a lot of things we talked about here as well as others. The Wired to Hunt podcast is the place to hear everything from deer hunting related topics to also some of this conservation stuff. All my TV film kind of stuff is on the MeatEater YouTube channel. And then if you want to check out that book you mentioned, it's called That Wild Country. That is, you can buy it on Amazon, and also there are signed copies available on the MeatEater store still, I believe. And that book explores the past, present, and future of our public land system. So if you've been listening to this and are like, maybe I should learn a little bit about how we got these places and all that, that book might be a good place to start. It explores all that through a series of my own adventures out there on these public landscapes, hunting and fishing and rafting and backpacking and a bunch of cool stuff. So that might be something to check out too.
Yeah, definitely go check it out. I've been listening to the Wired to Hunt podcast since way back, and the blog before that. I remember at work in the mornings, I'd be I'd be stuck at work, and it'd be October, and I had my rutcation coming up, and I'd be on the blog going through. I loved, at that time, like, blogs and definitely cranking, and I loved it. So I've appreciated all the work that you've done, over when you said you started Wired to Hunt in 2008, I mean, it kind of makes you seem pretty old.
I know.
But
tell me, it's crazy.
Almost 20 years of it, man. That's pretty awesome, and love seeing the work. So, and the book, That Wild Country, like I said, I have it on my bookshelf and read it and highly recommend it to people. So I appreciate you coming on, Mark, taking the time out of your day and doing this with me. I think it's really helpful.
Yeah. Thank you, Beau, too, for the opportunity to talk with you. It's always great to catch up, and for doing this great work on your podcast and your platforms too. You've been a really positive and helpful voice for so many people over the years. So keep up the good work, buddy.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks. And I appreciate everyone listening as well. We will see you next week. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this conversation, share it with your buddies. Leave us a rating, a review, and subscribe. If you want to check out more content like this, there's plenty in the links below. We truly appreciate having you guys along with us.